The 20th of February, 1944. Dawn over eastern England trembles with thunder. From frozen runways, more than 800 American B-17s and B-24s heave into the sky, joined by hundreds of P-51 and P-47 escorts. Ground crews shout above the roar, bomb carts clatter, and the scent of fuel and hot oil mixes with the winter mist. Across the channel, German radar screens light up like storm clouds. Sirens wail through cities still scarred from years of war. As the bomber stream reaches enemy airspace, chaos erupts. Black flak bursts blossom around the formations, jarring entire aircraft as if struck by invisible fists. Tracer fire slashes upward in red and green streaks. Oxygen masks freeze over. Intercoms crackle with frantic calls. Enemy fighters dive from the sun, twisting through contrails to rip apart the formation. Bomb bay doors creak open, while pilots fight to keep steady amid the storm of steel. This is Command of the Air, the Allied campaign to bomb Nazi Germany into submission. A strategy born from World War I theory, hardened in the furnaces of technology, and executed with a mix of courage, chaos, and moral ambiguity. From early disasters to the triumph of Big Week and the support of D-Day, the air war would help break the Nazi war machine, even as it tested the limits of precision, endurance, and conscience. Between the world wars, air power advocates in the United States worked to turn daring theory into hardware. Visionaries like Henry Hap Arnold, Carl Spaatz, and Ira Eaker pushed for bombers that could fly farther, higher, and heavier than anything built before. Boeing answered with the B-17 Flying Fortress, a 4-engine giant capable of more than 2,000 miles at over 200 miles per hour. Its partner, the consolidated B-24 Liberator, promised even greater range and bomb load. Precision was to come from the revolutionary Norden bombsight, which under ideal conditions could supposedly drop a bomb into a pickle barrel. Engineers and planners believed tight formations of heavily armed bombers could defend themselves and strike by daylight with near-surgical accuracy. Early B-17s, however, lacked armor and carried only a handful of machine guns, reflecting the assumption that altitude alone would keep fighters away. Fighter development lagged, escorts were considered unnecessary. Meanwhile, in Britain, bitter experience led to a different path. After heavy daylight losses, the Royal Air Force shifted to nighttime area bombing. American airmen absorbed the lessons but clung to their doctrine of daylight precision, setting the stage for a massive technological gamble, one that would soon meet the brutal test of European skies. When the United States entered World War II, its air leaders were confident that tight formations of B-17 Flying Fortresses and B-24 Liberators, guided by the Norden bombsight, could cripple Germany with daylight precision strikes. The 8th Air Force was formed in England in mid-1942, but heavy bombers were scarce. Its first combat mission on July 4 used borrowed RAF A-20 light bombers and caused only minor damage. 6 weeks later, 12 B-17s of the 97th Bomb Group attacked the Rouen rail yards in France under perfect blue skies. All returned safely, and commanders hailed the raid as proof that daylight precision bombing would work. The first major deep penetration raids tested every belief in daylight precision. In August 1943, 376 American bombers struck Regensburg and Schweinfurt. They inflicted serious damage, but paid a staggering price. 60 bombers and 600 airmen lost in a single day. With Spitfire escorts limited to short ranges, B-17s and B-24s had to fight hundreds of miles beyond fighter cover. Their own dozen 50 caliber guns and tight formations could not stop swarms of Me-109 and Fw-190 interceptors. Bad weather and relentless flak compounded the danger. The Norden bombsight, accurate in training, struggled in the turbulence of Europe's skies. Bombs fell wide, and key plants often resumed production within weeks. Yet these bloody missions forced the Luftwaffe into constant battle, wearing down its pilots and straining its resources. Point-Blank's crucible revealed both the vulnerability and the potential of American air power, setting the stage for a new strategy and the decisive big week to come. Reality soon hit hard. As missions deepened into occupied Europe, German Messerschmitt Me-109 and Focke-Wulf 190 fighters, guided by radar and backed by thick flak, shredded bomber formations, losses of 10–20% per raid became common. Clouds, high winds, and exploding shells often blinded bombardiers, scattering bombs far from their targets and undermining the ideal of surgical accuracy. Survival demanded massive formations of at least 300 bombers, numbers the 8th rarely achieved in its early months. The baptism of fire over Europe exposed the painful gap between interwar theory and combat reality, forcing US airmen to adapt or face ruin. By mid-1943, Allied leaders knew they had to weaken Germany's air defenses before any invasion of Western Europe could succeed. The answer was Operation Pointblank, a joint US and British plan to destroy German fighter strength and the industries that supported it. Ball-bearing plants at Schweinfurt, aircraft factories at Regensburg, and key airfields became prime targets. In February 1944, the Allied air campaign reached a decisive climax with Big Week, a coordinated assault aimed at smashing the Luftwaffe's fighter force and the factories that kept it alive. Beginning on February 20, 1944, the 8th Air Force launched waves of B-17 Flying Fortresses and B-24 Liberators, over 800 bombers on the first day alone, escorted by nearly as many P-51 Mustangs, P-47 Thunderbolts, and P-38 Lightnings. Their mission? Cripple aircraft production in cities like Leipzig, Regensburg, and Stuttgart, while luring German fighters into open battle. The skies erupted in chaos. Flak bursts turned daylight to black, and Luftwaffe pilots attacked with desperate fury. Yet Jimmy Doolittle's new policy let escorts leave the bomber boxes to hunt freely. Armed with long-range drop tanks, American fighters slashed into enemy formations, destroying aircraft in the air and strafing airfields on the return. By week's end, the Allies flew 6 massive raids in 7 days, claiming hundreds of enemy fighters and, more crucially, killing or capturing many irreplaceable veteran pilots. German aircraft factories could rebuild machines, but not the seasoned men to fly them. Big Week shattered the Luftwaffe's strength, secured Allied control of the skies, and cleared the way for D-Day and the final drive into Germany. As the June 6, 1944 invasion of Normandy approached, Allied air strategy shifted from deep strikes inside Germany to tactical destruction of France's transport network and coastal defenses. For weeks, American B-17s and B-24s, joined by RAF bombers, hammered rail yards, bridges, and highways, while P-47 Thunderbolts and P-38 Lightnings strafed trains and convoys. The goal was simple: isolate the battlefield and prevent German reinforcements from reaching the beaches. On D-Day itself, more than 10,000 Allied aircraft filled the skies. Fighter bombers swept ahead of the invasion fleet, hunting anything that moved within 50 miles of the coast. Pilots were called flying 3 missions a day, destroying locomotives, trucks, and communication lines. The result was striking only a handful of German planes appeared over the beaches, giving Allied troops almost complete air cover. Air power also supported the breakout from the beachhead. At Street Low in late July, massive bombardments smashed German positions, though stray bombs tragically hit American units. Panzer Commander Fritz Behrlein reported that 70% of his soldiers were dead, wounded, crazed, or dazed, clearing the way for Patton's advance. By paralyzing German movement and shattering defenses, tactical air operations turned the air war's strategic might into immediate battlefield success. By 1944, the Allies turned their attention to what made Hitler's war machine move: oil. Repeated ruthless attacks on Romania's Ploiești fields and Germany's synthetic fuel plants aimed not simply to ruin factories, but to choke mobility, to stop tanks, trucks, and aircraft at the source. Beginning in May 1944, American forces hit depots and ersatz oil factories relentlessly, while the RAF launched dozens of supporting raids. And the cumulative pressure on fuel production began to bite. The results were stark. Refineries and synthetic plants, ringed with dense flak, paid a terrible price in both damage and defender casualties. But the strategic payoff came in attrition of fuel stocks. By late 1944, the Wehrmacht and Luftwaffe were increasingly fuel poor. Jet fighters like the Me-262 sat idle or were towed to runways by oxen and cows. Armored spearheads stalled with empty tanks. Recruits logged far fewer hours in the cockpit. Railway and bridge strikes compounded the crisis, severing the lifelines that might have rerouted dwindling supplies. Strangling fuel did not end the war by itself, but it neutralized German mobility, degraded air defense, and multiplied the effectiveness of Allied ground offensives, turning raw destruction into strategic paralysis. At first, US leaders insisted they targeted only military and industrial sites, but reality blurred that line. Bad weather, flak, and navigation errors sent bombs into residential districts. Some missions, like those against Münster and later Dresden and Berlin, accepted civilian destruction as a tactic. Airmen hardened by seeing London bombed often felt no remorse. As General LeMay bluntly said, "I was a soldier, soldiers fight." Debates also swirled over whether to bomb Auschwitz or the railways feeding it. Military leaders argued it would divert crucial resources and that precision strikes might fail. The missions never happened. By May 1945, surveys showed Germany had lost less than 4% of its total industrial capacity, and some cities like Hamburg recovered production within weeks. Yet strategic bombing's contribution was decisive in other ways. It crippled the Luftwaffe, ensuring Allied armies and the D-Day fleet faced little opposition from the air. It destroyed fuel stocks and synthetic plants, paralyzing tanks and trucks. It forced Germany to divert fighters, guns, and labor from the eastern and western fronts to defend its skies. In the end, it was the combination of relentless air assault and ground offensive Soviet and Western that brought Nazi Germany down. The Allied bombing of Germany began as a theory and became a vast, grinding reality. From the smoky skies over Schweinfurt to the thunder over Normandy, it tested technology, courage, and conscience. Though it did not alone win the war, it shaped every Allied victory that followed, securing command of the air, starving the enemy's engines, and hastening the end of the Third Reich. Above the fields and cities of Europe, the roar of the bombers carried both the promise of liberation and the weight of unprecedented destruction, a dual legacy that still echoes in the history of modern warfare.